Hi guys, it's James from Pace. Back in 2021 I started a video series that I intended to update regularly to keep you guys up to date on what I was working on with my own cars. Unfortunately I've been a bit too busy with the business and the shop, and I never really got around to doing that as planned. So one thing, if you've watched the previous video about my GALM, that you may notice is this one's a different GALM. Now I used to have two. I had a 10th anniversary GALM and this one, which is my original black GALM that incidentally I've had for over 5 years now. I actually sold the 10th anniversary GALM. When the high motor and rear motor kits came out, I built my 10th anniversary GALM to be high motor. Well, this chassis was in storage and I ended up building it back up as a rear motor. I instantly clicked with the rear motor. I basically put this together, put it down, and really enjoyed driving it. It was so much fun, so fast, so competitive, and just generally I was having a blast driving it, and it meant that I actually didn't drive the 10th anniversary GALM very much with the high motor configuration. Now, it's not to say there's anything wrong with the high motor configuration. I do plan to go back to a high motor setup, but it was literally just a case of I wasn't getting much time to drive because I was busy with the shop and serving customers and things at the track. So I just stuck with the rear motor, and I just had the realisation I had a highly collectible and expensive chassis sat there barely being driven. Now, what I've decided to do with that is I've focused on this chassis, but I'm also going to build a second anti-twist that's going to get built with different specs, but I'll talk about that when that comes in. So I'm going to bring you up to speed on what I've done with this chassis. You'll notice that the chassis is also different itself, the decks. This is the Transrain chassis. You can see here it's set to regular wheelbase because I'm using this with the same Overdose body, the Mark X I've been running for a long time now that I keep meaning to replace, but just struggling to find time to make a fresh one for it. I'm running the same HG version 3 dampers, but now I've actually made the larger whole piston set work for me at last. So I'm now using 0.9 by 6 pistons and 1.5mm thick. And I believe this is 10 weight in the front and 15 in the rear oil, and it works really well. The springs on the front are Rio spec 1.1 34mm 8 coils, and on the rear I'm actually using Rev D springs. I bought these to test when they first came out. I actually can't remember the set, but they're the rear set that they brought out a while back, and I put them on, and with all the weight of the rear motor like this, I basically found that these springs are really lazy, but it means that the car just grips and goes. The weight transfers to the back, and instead of springing back up, it just holds, and so it means that the car really squats, really goes, and is quite fast. There's new Overdose springs coming, which I'm definitely going to test, but for now these have worked really well. I haven't really changed them since I got them. They just kind of, like I say, I put this car together, it just worked, and I haven't done loads to it until fairly recently. So one of the new things I've done is that I've fitted the new TC wider mounts. So we've got the 57.2 on the rear and 61.7 on the rear front, and so that gives me a 3-degree trailing angle. And because I've now got the Type 3 rear arms, that means I can run 3-degree trailing angle again. I stopped running the Type 2 for a while because they're quite heavy, and with everyone else running super light chassis, I mean, the guys I'm running with now have got chassis that without a body are hitting around 1,000 grams, 1,050 grams and things like that. So just to keep the weight down, I was running the ES arms, which are obviously non-adjustable, but it just meant I wasn't able to run 3 degrees trailing angle. So now I am, and I've only tested this one time since these came in last weekend at NRD, and I can't really make too much of a comment, but I used to love running 3 degrees trailing angle. It used to be my go-to setting for a long time, but when I ran at NRD at the weekend, it was the first time running since they put a fresh coat of paint on, so the traction level was very different to the previous times I've been running there, so I'll have to run there a couple more times to be able to judge. Incidentally, tomorrow I'm actually at the new opening of Slide House in Lincolnshire. They were forced to close a while back, but they've managed to reopen with a new venue, so I'm looking forward to that. That's a P-tile track for anyone interested, and there is a Facebook group that I'll link below. So anyway, back to the car. I'm running the arms very narrow as they can go with 3 degrees, so you can see that there's just one difference, or you won't be able to see, but there's one difference front to rear, because each of these notches is a 3-degree difference, and I'm running 2 degrees on the hubs, which works quite well for me. You can see I'm also running the ES arms on the front for now. There is new adjustable arms coming, and I will get a set, but I'm very happy with the ES arms. They've served me really well. It's all worked really well. I'm running the narrowest TC arms on the front and rear, the same as I was before. I've been really happy with that setting. I keep getting tempted to play around going one notch wider, but The front end of this is so good that I'm tempted to just leave it as it is for the time being and maybe play around on the other chassis when I build that one up. A major change that I've done since the last time I made a video like this, I've swapped to the 10PX from the 7PXR. It's not an upgrade I'd recommend to many people because there's not a huge difference, but if you're able to sell your 7PXR and get a 10PX, there are a few nice perks that you can go or that you can use that you can't on a 7PX. So I really like the response feature, which allows you to change how quick the car how quick the response of the car feels. To me, when I first put the 10PX on and left it in default, it felt too nervous and twitchy. I'm not somebody who likes the most responsive car. I like it to be softened just a little bit. So I actually turned that down, and on one of my cars, I've turned it all the way down. But that is a very different driving style. You also get to use the R4F4 SBSE receiver, which is super neat and compact, as you can see there. I'm still using the Dives gyro, it's still my favourite. Although I have grown to like the GYD 550 from Futaba a bit more than I used to. I still struggle with it a little bit, and this one I just click with. It works perfectly for me. I haven't had to adjust it other than maybe tweaking the game for different tracks a tiny bit in a long time. One thing you can see here is I've actually put a chassis brace in. Overdose are releasing a new front chassis brace for the GALM fairly soon, actually. I can't remember when it's coming out, and this is a temporary measure just for the time being. I've just used a couple of posts and some spacers to make that work. Now the Overdose brace will be better than this because it actually has it uses 2 holes on the bottom instead of just 1, so it will actually brace a bit better. I'm told it brings back a bit more front end feeling when you've got when you remove the centre brace at the rear, which I've done because I'm on rear motor with the battery plate slid back a bit further back. That's one thing I have done here as well that's not really standard, is I've moved the battery plate all the way back, which you can't do when you're using the wider TC mounts because it interferes, as you can see there. So I've spaced the battery tray up probably 5 or 6 mil. I've spaced it what was required, and I can't tell you exactly what it was because I never bothered to measure. I just made it work. Still using the Fledge. This one has a high torque rotor in. It's still the same 10.5 I was running before, and I'm still really happy with it. I've barely had to even service my own Fledges since I started running them when they launched, so I'm really happy with these. I see some people saying that they prefer the Agile, and the only thing I prefer about an Agile is the noise. Fledge sounds a bit flat, but actually performance-wise, it's far superior in every way in terms of actual smoothness, output, power, and temperature. Everything is better on a Fledge for me, except for the noise. But I run it with the fan, and I do run the Blaze as well. Same Jarvis XX recently updated to version 2.2, so you have a bit better low-end throttle control with the dead zone. I'm super happy with this setup. It's all really good. I've stashed them away, I was going to say nicely, but it's still a bit of a mess because there's so many wires. But I'm actually running 2 vectors on this, which I know is a bit of overkill. But I installed one when they first came out, and I was really happy with it. And I had a second one there for a different chassis. And just for fun, I chucked it in. So I've got one going between the S-Bus adapter and the receiver. And I've got one going between the gyro and the receiver. And actually, it surprised me how nicely it works. So I've just left them in there, and I bought another one for the other chassis. Jumping around a bit. Back on the front end, I'm running the TC upper arm brackets that make the upper arms really short, but it also lowers the mounting point and pushes it out. I'm very happy with them. It took me a little while to get the settings right on that, but since getting them to work, I've been very happy. I also will put them back on the rear soon, but I need to tweak a bit more before I put those on, and I might save those for a different tune that I've got planned for this. One thing I have changed since the last video is I've started running a bit lower FDR. I used to run generally I was happy about 14.5 on the low grip surfaces. I've recently changed, and I'm running about 10.5 to 11 depending on the track. I find if I'm struggling on the track, if I go to a higher FDR, it makes it easier. If I'm comfortable on the track, going to a lower FDR just makes me faster. A big change that I've overlooked is I've switched to running Valino tyres every time I'm at a track where it's allowed. They, to me, are the perfect tyre. I couldn't be happier. I prefer them to absolutely everything that I've been able to run. They are the 08C. The RS is not the tyre to run if you want to drive the way most people want to drive. The RS is far too grippy for most people, I think, but the 08C is a beautiful tyre, and I run the 30 mils on the rear and the 26 on the front on almost every car. On my MD1 I'm running 26 and 26 just while I get settled with that chassis. But for me, I absolutely love them. You can see these are quite worn on the rear actually, and I probably need to swap them over. But I'll be at Slidehouse tomorrow where they run top line tyres, so I'll be switching those on, and then I'll be back on the Valinos for when I go back to NRD and Ronin. I'm still running the same servo. It's the RSX3. I am very, very happy with it, and I have been using the BSX4 drift spec Grasper 2 in some other chassis, and I'm also very happy with that, but they're very, very different servos. This is a super smooth, very responsive servo that I'm very comfortable with. The BSX is a bit torquier, a bit more glitchy if you don't tone it down, and but it is more tunable, so you can tone it down and you can have a bit more power, but it doesn't quite go as smooth as this, but it's still very good. I'm also running the JT servo horn, which I'm very happy with as well. It does put a bit more risk because it's not a servo saver, it's a direct connection, but you can tune it to be just the right length to sit under your chassis top deck, which works quite nicely. Alongside that, I'm also obviously running the JT ESC mount, which works absolutely superb on the GALM. It also works on other chassis because it will also, the hole spacing basically for the lower mount is very similar on other suspension mounts and things, so it will work on many more chassis than just the GALM. I do plan on moving this ESC. I've sort of put it up here just to try, but it's quite close to the body. But I wanted it over the axle as best as I could. And now I actually want to flip it so that it sits over the main shaft, I think. I was a bit concerned that it might drop down and touch the pulley or be a problem, but actually it won't. But it means I'll be able to run shorter wires and just drop it a bit lower, which I think will work better for me. But I might be wrong, so I may end up going back to this spot. I'm back to running a ball diff with the belt drive because this is a belt drive only configuration for the rear motor. When I go to high motor, I'm probably going to go back to running gear drive because I'm quite happy with that. I did a test with the CLSD from Rhino Max or Rhino Racing, and I was quite happy with it, but it didn't really offer enough to warrant the awkward setup that I had because I had different length drive shafts and offsetting the diff and things like that. They've since come out with a GALM specific version, but for me, I'm probably just going to stick with the ball diff, I think, because I was quite happy with it. You can also see that I'm running the battery tray, and as I mentioned before, I have moved it back as far as I can. I'm not using a battery holder anymore, or the aluminium one. I'm using the standard plastic one just for weight. I haven't weighed this in a little while, although I might just go and do that right now. So this isn't particularly lightweight. As you see it here, without a battery, it's 1,220 grams. The Valino tyres are quite heavy, so when I run it on other tyres, it will be lighter. But like I said, I'm so happy with the performance of these that it just works perfectly for me, to be perfectly honest. The feeling on these tyres is the best of any tyre I've ever used. The speed is as good as you can hope for. They're a bit slower than most other tyres, although some people can manage to find a bit more speed on these than others, but it's negligible. It's close enough that one guy might be a bit quicker on these, but then he'll be slower in the corners, so it balances out. But I found that the twinning gets tighter when you run the Valinos. This is on polished concrete, painted concrete, and P-tile where I've driven them, and yeah, just everything tightens up. For competitions, I think it works really well as well because they highlight a skill difference a bit more than other tyres. So what am I planning to change on this? Well, I have an anti-twist chassis set coming, and since I'm running the standard wheelbase at the moment, I'm going to probably swap it onto the anti-twist chassis just to shave a bit of weight and keep things a bit simple. This trans-range deck is going to go on another GALM that I'm going to build up that will go to long wheelbase because I haven't run a long wheelbase chassis for some time, but I've got a 275 crown body. It took me a while to find the 275 body in this day and age. Unfortunately, the only one I could find was the one I was the least interested in, which is the crown. I don't think it's the best looking body, but it will do. I do need to get it painted, so it might be a little while until that happens. But I plan to run one that's a long wheelbase for a little while, and then this one is probably going to go back to high motor just to feel the difference first. And I want to make some changes to the damper. I want to go a little bit thicker with the oil and just do some more testing and tuning with it again. So far, I'm so happy with all the parts that are on it that it's very difficult for me to warrant making changes to this chassis because I like the fact that when I'm busy and I don't get many hours of driving in, I can just put it down and drive straight away and be happy. And I'm not trying to fix any tuning mistakes I've made or work around a problem that I've created for myself by making tweaks to the chassis. I do have a load of Valino wheels that came in recently, the colour GV330s, which they'll be going back on at some point because I'm a big fan, but I've been really enjoying these lime green Siaco Armies. So I'm a bit spoilt for choice with wheels at the moment. We do have some of these wheels left and some of the Valinos left at the time of making this video. So if you're interested, you can check out rcpace.com and see for yourself what's left in stock. Still running the aluminium bulkhead, even though I don't need to because it's on belt drive, but I like, as I mentioned before, I like the weight and the rigidity that it adds on the back end. Incidentally, these side braces that came with the high motor kit are now going to be available to buy separately. So if you run the rear motor like me, you can use them, and you haven't got to buy a high motor kit for them. So they work really well because they're fixed in 2 places on the bulkhead, so they don't allow the top deck to flex. I'm sure there's something I'm missing, but if you've got any questions about this chassis or any of the parts I'm using, just fire a comment below and I'll do my best to answer. And if you want to see the parts that I've got fitted, you can check out rcpace.com. The latest arrivals category is always updated when new parts come in. Any significant new parts that are coming in are always offered as pre-order, so you can you can reserve yourself the parts before they arrive, and they'll be shipped out the day they land with me. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you want to see some more videos like this. And as I say before, if you want to ask any questions, fire away in the comments, and share this video with anyone you think might like it.